2 Minuten noch. 2 Minuten. 2 fucking Minuten. Nur zur Info, wer seinen Twitch-Account mit seinem Path of Exile-Account verbindet und der ganzen Geschichte 30 Minuten zuguckt, kriegt ein 30 US-Dollar Cosmetic Item. Also, wer es noch nicht gemacht hat, kann es jetzt tun. Ihr habt irgendwie, glaube ich, von 10 bis 6 Uhr morgens Zeit, die 30 Minuten abzuleisten sozusagen. Und dann könnt ihr euch ein schickes Item holen.
Hi, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And today is the day about Path of Exile. You're going to find out a lot of awesome stuff we've been working on. Before we get started though, I wanted to mention that there are Twitch drops that you can win. Below the live stream there are some instructions for signing up and linking your Twitch account with your Path of Exile account, and if you do that, you'll be eligible to receive the drops. So today's live stream has got 4 sections. They say you should start your show with a bang, so we're going to start right off with Path of Exile 2. After that, we're going to show you Path of Exile Ultimatum. This is an expansion for regular Path of Exile that's coming out literally next week. After that, we're going to be joined by Ziggy D, who's going to host a Q&A where he asks me a whole bunch of questions from Twitch chat. So if you have any questions about the various reveals, make sure to keep them for the Q&A. Then there's going to be a live episode of the Bay Class podcast where Take Cat and his crew of Path of Exile veterans are going to discuss all of the things we've announced today. They'll be joined by Rory Rackham, who's the Grinding Gear Games developer who was in charge of the development of the Ultimatum League.
Leute.
Alright,
Wow.
Let's get started. You're probably wondering, why has it been so long since we last showed you any Path of Exile 2 footage? And honestly, this is because the project is so important to us that we are definitely taking our time to make sure that we make the best possible action RPG. Let's watch a new trailer.
Ooh, here we go.
Among ancient ruins, evil grows once more. The seed of corruption advances, spreading dread and despair. We must give chase.
Ah, das sieht so schön aus.
These sands hide countless secrets. 3,000 years
Das sieht so
of
cool aus.
malevolence. We must hunt down the seed and put an end to this madness. If Rayclast is to survive.
Ach, schön. Nice, 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 nice.
That trailer really shows what we have achieved with Path of Exile 2. I am so proud of the efforts of the entire team in putting that together. At ExileCon, we announced that Path of Exile 2 is a true sequel to Path of Exile. So that means a new 7-act campaign, it means a whole new skill gem system, new items, new monsters, character classes, all the Ascendancy classes are completely new, it's got cutting-edge next-generation graphics as you just saw. Basically, it's everything you would expect from a sequel to Path of Exile. But we're not just throwing away our legacy, we're embracing it. Both campaigns will be fully playable from within the same game client. You'll be able to play through the original Path of Exile storyline or the new Path of Exile 2 campaign on the way to the shared endgame. All of your old characters will still be playable, and of course any microtransaction purchases you've made in Path of Exile will carry on to the sequel.
Cool.
At ExileCon, we introduced the dark forests of the island of Ogden, where you start your journey. Today, we're proud to showcase Path of Exile 2's second act, which takes place in the Vastiri Desert. Welcome to Path of Exile 2's second act. As you saw in the trailer, Act 2 is centered around a caravan of Maraketh called the Ardura who live in the Vastiri Desert. You're chasing another caravan from an opposing tribe called the Faradun. There's a set of large ancient gates blocking the progress of the caravan through a desert pass, so you're being sent through the Traitor's Passage to unlock them.
We shall wait here, Jingak. But the military carts have departed for the gates. Make haste!
Yeah, we shall wait here, no?
Path of Exile 2 is a lot more than just new acts. We want combat to feel both brutal and responsive, even at low levels. We're ensuring that each weapon type has unique and different mechanics. Each weapon class feels different to play, and today we're going to start by demonstrating the new Spear weapon class. Spears are a weapon class favoring mobility with both melee and ranged attack options. To that end, each spear will grant you at least one mobility skill. In this case, the spear comes with both an engage and disengage skill. When you engage, it increases your melee damage for a short time, and that really encourages you to be mobile during combat.
Okay.
One of the skills we're using here is called Whirling Slash. When you use Whirling Slash, it creates a sandstorm that grows in size each time you use the skill. When you leave the sandstorm, it explodes, dealing damage to nearby monsters. A great way to do that is to use the disengage skill, which makes you fly backwards and throw projectiles.
Maraketh-Bogen. Maraketh-Bogen gibt's immer noch. Sehr gut.
In PoE 2, each area's mini-boss is a much more substantial fight with interesting mechanics. You'll be able to find at least one mini-boss in each area of the game. One thing I love about this boss in particular is that it destroys the ceiling when it slams the ground, letting in more light. Clever players will notice that if they're standing in the light, then they're not going to have any rocks falling on their head.
Das ist cool gemacht.
The rapid assault skill that we're using against this boss does 3 rapid stabs, followed by a 4th stab that deals more damage and can stun, if you're willing to commit to a long attack time. While developing the skills for Path of Exile 2, we were really thinking a lot about designing skills that could be cancelled early to dodge, or you can commit to the full attack for maximum damage.
The Rattle Cage.
One of the skills we're using here is called Spear Field, which creates an area of spears coming out of the ground that impale monsters who walk into them, causing them to bleed. As the monsters move towards you, they take damage, so using your mobility skills as a way to move away from them is a great strategy here. In Path of Exile 2, we've invested a lot in our animation system. I'm sure you're noticing the animations are looking a lot better than they did in PoE 1. But there's also a lot of subtle detail, like characters having different run animations depending on how fast they're moving. When we use a Quicksilver Flask here, you can see the character changes to a sprinting animation.
Ja, also okay, also die Sprintanimation ist einfach das Rennen, das schnellere Laufen. Diesen Unterschied sehe ich da jetzt nicht aus, sodass er die Beine schneller bewegt.
Now that we've arrived at the Ancient Gates, we're going to show you another of the new weapon classes in Path of Exile 2, Crossbows. Crossbows are special in that they grant attack skills implicitly. This particular crossbow grants Power Shot, which is a high damage single target attack. In order to modify what Power Shot does, you're going to need to equip Bolt skill gems, which change the type of bolts that are loaded into the crossbow. Here we've got 3 different bolt skills that the character can switch between depending on the situation.
Armor-piercing bolts. Incendiary bolts.
That's cool.
Permafrost bolts can be used to disrupt packs of enemies to prevent them from closing in on your position. You can then follow up with armor-piercing bolts to do plenty of damage. In this area, we're helping Asala, leader of the Ardura, to open the ancient gates and let the caravan through. Because the bolt types are the skill gems, support gems that are added to them will modify whatever the skill is that you're using. Here we're going to add multiple projectiles to our incendiary bolt.
That's cool. I like it. Nice.
In Path of Exile 2, we're doing a lot more interesting things with monster packs. Here you can see some of the monsters patrolling around.
Yeah.
Incendiary bolts. Armor-piercing bolts. Permafrost bolts. Armor-piercing bolts.
Ja gut, das sieht ziemlich cool aus. Sieht sau cool aus. Aber ich glaube, das Armor Piercing Bolt, Firebolt, Icebolt. Ich glaube, das würde mir ein bisschen auf den Sack gehen die ganze Zeit. Ja, einer schreibt hier schon. Can you shut up?
Now we're coming to another example of a Path of Exile 2 mini-boss, Labyrinth the Impaler.
Incendiary bolts. Armor-piercing bolts.
The boss has dropped another type of crossbow, a siege crossbow. This crossbow grants the Siege Cascade skill. The skill is also modified depending on what type of bolts you're using.
Permafrost bolts. Incendiary bolts. Onwards, give these demons no quarter. Incendiary bolts. Armor-piercing bolts. Permafrost bolts. Incendiary bolts.
Ja, also das ständige Ansagen vom
We try to add a lot more level
Bolzenwechsel
details
geht
to
noch
combat in
nichts.
Path of Exile 2. You might notice that the monsters who die while burning have charred corpses. We really want to make sure that there's a feeling that as you leave the battlefield, there's clear evidence of what combat took place there.
Permafrost bolts. Armor-piercing bolts. Permafrost bolts. Incendiary bolts. Incendiary bolts.
She says bolts a lot. Also,
Permafrost bolts.
das geht mir auf den Keks.
Incendiary bolts.
Die ständige Wechsel. Bolts, Bolts, Bolts.
Incendiary bolts. Permafrost bolts. Incendiary bolts. Permafrost bolts.
Ja, das ist zu viel.
Incendiary bolts.
Ständig das Bolts, 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 Bolts.
Armor piercing bolts.
This is the perennial king, the leader of the Faradun. His goal here is to prevent you from catching the caravan at any cost.
Armor piercing bolts.
Outsider, we fight!
Ich meine, die Animationen sehen so geil aus. Alles schön super flüssig. Alles schön dunkel. Ah, schön eklig. Nice. So muss das. Alles schön eklig.
We will finish this, but not.
Make haste! He must not escape! Quickly! He conjures the very sands against us!
This madness has gone on long enough. The king is not the man I once knew. And sands swallow me if I do any more to enable him. You plan to continue your pursuit, yes? You will not catch him. Not without me.
We cannot follow through the raging sands. Let us return to the caravan and question this defector.
This is the Ardura caravan, your town in Act 2.
I am Asala, the Sekima of the Ardura. I care not where you came from, nor what caste you might have been there. All that matters is that you have shown yourself capable in battle, Jingak. Remain a friend to the Ardura, and you shall have nothing but respect from us. From what your shade has told us, the situation is dire. This Balbalic will live or die based on her usefulness in pursuit of the seed of corruption. Ask her what questions you will, then we, Ardura, will decide her fate.
You need not trust me. You will see the truth of my information soon enough. I ask nothing of you. Only that you do what you know is right.
One of the things we really wanted to do in Act 2 was to use the mobility of the caravan to allow the player to choose how they explore the Act. Here you're given 4 options on how to proceed.
There is a tribe of lost men that inhabits the Mastodon Badlands. They worship the bones of those long ago beasts, and that faith has given rise to powerful tasks that can somehow call on storms and strike enemies with lightning. The
optisch sieht das
king
halt
wishes
brutal
to
gut
steal
aus.
these objects of worship and use their lightning in war. Do what you must.
Though events demand you tread upon a valley
Was
of the
ist dieses
dead, do
Quest-Symbol?
not
Ist
do
das
so
irgendwie...
flagrantly.
Keine
Keep your
Ahnung.
presence light.
Irgendwie ein Schwert?
Cleanse what corruption you can, and we shall skirmish with the Faradun to protect your flank.
Once you've picked your destination, the caravan will travel to that area and come to a stop so that you can disembark and go on your quest. Because we just got the Storm Sphere skill as a quest reward, now would be a great time to switch back to spears and use some ranged abilities.
some ranged abilities.
Storm Spear fires a lightning projectile which splits on contact. The other skill we're using here is called Blazing Lance. Blazing Lance creates a trail of fire from the ground, dealing damage over time. However, if you're willing to stand in place for long enough, you can throw a second spear that will fan the flames for much more damage.
We've
just found a unique spear. It's called Devata's Wind. This spear has an extra modifier that synergizes really well with Storm Spear. When you disengage, you get 2 additional projectiles on your projectile skills.
Nice. Ich finde es halt auch cool, dass es so ein bisschen den ursprünglichen, also hier gerade die Rare Mobs haben noch diesen Yellow Glow. Das ist schon cool gemacht. Nice. Also Kampfsystem sieht überragend aus. Mal gucken, bis der erste das richtig abused. Also gerade was Geschwindigkeiten und mega. Ich würde mal gerne die Minimap tatsächlich sehen. Ich würde tatsächlich gerne mal die Minimap sehen. Sieht das viel ekliger aus. Geil. Ja, die Lightning-Effekte sind halt... Wow. Double Posting ist natürlich auch cool. Ah, die Feuereffekte gerade. Genau, jetzt die... Das ist... Nice. Minimum wird mich interessieren. Loot-Filter ist, glaube ich, immer ein Riesenthema. Das würde mich interessieren, ob die vielleicht mal eine eingebaut haben. Wäre halt grandios, wenn man in-game einen Loot-Filter konfigurieren könnte. Auto-Loot. Konfigurierbares Auto-Loot. Warum nicht? Wäre halt mega, ne?
If you have any questions about what you just saw, we'll be doing a Q&A later on. While Path of Exile 2 definitely won't be released this year, we do have a Path of Exile expansion you can play 1 week from now. I'd like to introduce Path of Exile Ultimatum.
Was das jetzt?
You only live once, Exile. Make your choice. A simple ultimatum. Leave with your life and a meager reward, or risk it all for a chance at ungodly riches. For each trial you accept, the challenge grows. But fail and leave with nothing. Reap the reward you deserve.
Invaders, Bestiary. Okay. Okay. Die lassen ja Path of Exile 1 und 2 dann parallel laufen, ne? Ultimatum. Okay, 16. April geht's los. Ah, gut, nicht schlecht. Ich habe jetzt die letzte Liga tatsächlich verpasst.
When some people think of the Val civilization,
Ich hatte zwar
they
angefangen,
think of
wieder einen
blood
Charakter zu leveln, aber
sacrifices, Queen at
gesagt,
Zeri,
ich
or
kann
lost
es
temples in
nicht
the
mehr
jungle.
sehen. Ich kann
But
das
I think of
Geleveln
risking
nicht
your
mehr sehen.
items. From Val orbs through double
Das ist
corruption,
tatsächlich
the
das,
whole
was mich
Val
gerade
or
von
no
dem Spiel
balls meme.
abhält.
We had to
Das
make sure
Gelevele.
that this expansion was about the
Ständig
concept
dasselbe
of risking your
Schema.
items to get great reward. In each area of the Ultimatum League, you'll meet the Trial Master, an emissary of a Val entity only known as Chaos. On behalf of Chaos, the Trial Master enacts trials where exiles must risk an escalating set of valuable rewards as they attempt to overcome progressively more difficult encounters. In each trial, you'll be presented with a reward, an objective, and a selection of difficulty modifiers that make the trial harder. Once you've chosen one of the modifiers, you must then complete that objective under the constraints of that modifier in order to win the promised reward.
Okay. Gut, das heißt wieder Area of
If you
Effect
succeed in the
Sachen sind
challenge,
brutal
the Trial
stark.
Master will present you with an ultimatum. Either walk away with what you have earned so far, or risk it all to try to win additional rewards. He'll offer you another item if you can select an additional difficulty modifier and complete the challenge with both modifiers present. If you fail though, you'll lose both rewards and walk away with nothing.
Boom. Okay. Ja. I
If you
respect it.
succeed, you'll be offered an additional reward in exchange for adding yet another difficulty modifier that stacks on top of the current ones. This cycle continues until the rewards become increasingly valuable and the encounter extremely difficult. You'll have to pick a point to end your run and claim your spoils before you make the encounter too hard and lose everything. At its longest, an ultimatum in endgame maps can sometimes have up to 10 fast trials in a row, with a special surprise in the last one. In maps, you'll occasionally find items called Inscribed Ultimatums. These items can be placed in the map device to transport you to the Trial Master's domain. Each Inscribed Ultimatum specifies an offering that you must bring with you, a reward you can earn, and an assortment of ultimatum difficulty modifiers. If you're able to complete the Trial Master will reward you with a specified reward, which is usually worth around twice the value of the item you must bring. For example, you may be asked to risk an Exalted Orb to win a stack of 2, or potentially risk a stack of 5 to win a stack of 10. Naturally, inscribed ultimatums can be traded with other players, so if you don't feel capable of completing a difficult challenge, you may be able to trade it away for a portion of the difference in price between the reward and the item that must be risked. Likewise, if you have a powerful character, you may be able to selectively trade for profitable ultimatums to run. There are also new unique items that can only be obtained from Ultimatum. One such unique is the Glimpse of Chaos Val Mask, which provides powerful benefits to your maximum life, mana, and energy shield at the cost of having severely reduced elemental resistances and no chaos resistance. The item can be corrupted multiple times and has unique corruption outcomes, such as removing a random modifier or transforming it into a different random corrupted unique helmet entirely that retains its corruption implicit mod. Another new Val unique item in Ultimatum is Mahuzottl's Machination, which grants you 6 keystone passives at once. Combining all of these keystones results in some very unusual outcomes, and the item features an entirely new unique keystone as well. We have worked hard to make sure that Ultimatum doesn't punish you for being in a party with other players. Party members compete in trials together, but have separate rewards available to them that will need to be locked in to begin the trial. Each player votes on which difficulty modifiers to select. If there's a draw in votes, the modifier will be chosen at random. If one player wants to take their reward and opt out of the next difficult trial, they're able to do so without stopping the other party members from continuing.
Good.
Rewards are dropped allocated to the players who earned them. So that's Path of Exile Ultimatum.
Okay, that's gut.
I can tell you, on release day, a lot of our developers are looking forward to watching Twitch so we can see players risking far too much in order to try to get good rewards. Speaking of rewards, there's a lot to talk about here. We had a look at Path of Exile's past reward systems, and we honestly feel many of them are out of date, many of them kind of lack identity, and to top it all off, like the core drop pool of just items that drop when you kill regular monsters just wasn't really compelling enough. Like, you know that feeling where any monster could drop a mirror? We want that for a whole slew of different items. And so we've made a lot of changes to Path of Exile's reward systems. There's a bunch of ones to the core drop pool to keep it really interesting. There's ones to basically every piece of League and expansion-specific content. And we're going to go through all of those for quite a while now. And I should mention that every change we're about to discuss not only affects the Ultimatum League, but also Standard League too. We started by reviewing which items can drop from monsters and chests in the core game. To make sure the core drop pool remains compelling, we've made various changes. You can now find 2 additional currency items as core drops, Orbs of Binding from the Harbinger League, and the new Veiled Chaos Orb, which we'll reveal in more detail soon. We've also added 5 new Atlas base types, like this Energy Shield Recharge Amulet. These drop in specific regions of the Atlas of Worlds and have some powerful new implicit mods. Another topic related to the core drop pool is that of boss runs. Veteran community members will remember when people used to do Val Oversoul or Dominus runs over and over because they were a profitable use of time. Final Act bosses now drop more and better items, giving you a much more satisfying close to a difficult act and a more item-focused approach to getting ready for maps if you prefer. We have also added a bunch of very powerful and valuable League-specific uniques into the core drop pool. This means that they can drop from any sufficiently high-level monster without you having to engage with specialized content. Examples of these are Badge of the Brotherhood, Asylum, Pledge of Hands, Maloney's Mechanism, Brutus's Lead Sprinkler, and Headhunter. The goal of all of these changes is to make sure that every monster you kill in Path of Exile has a chance to drop something incredibly valuable, regardless of what content you're playing.
Good, okay.
On top of all of that, we have added a handful of new vendor recipes, which let you make some pretty cool stuff. We really missed the days when players were scrambling to try to find unknown recipes, and so we're looking forward to seeing how long it takes for you to discover how these ones work.
Nice.
We have also introduced a new type of reliquary key into the core drop pool for this expansion. If you're very lucky, you can find a Val reliquary key from any monster or chest in Path of Exile. When consumed in the map device, it gives you access to a vault with a chest that drops a special foil version of a Val-themed unique item. Each unique has an equal chance of dropping. Due to the value and power level of the items contained within, this is the rarest reliquary key ever added to Path of Exile. The rest of our reward changes relate to items that you can earn by playing past content like prior leagues and expansions. We have 2 goals here. The first is to add and improve items so that all past content is a compelling set of rewards. The second goal is to make it so that the best way to get any reward is to play the content that is primarily associated with that type of reward. Path of Exile's first expansion, Sacrifice of the Val, introduced a new ultimate boss, Adzeri, Queen of the Val. This fight holds up pretty well these days, considering that it is 7 years old, but its rewards really needed a refresh. The Sacrificial Garb base type that drops from Adzeri has been significantly improved with the addition of an implicit mod that grants +1 to the level of all Val gems you have equipped. We have also added 2 new unique items to Adzeri's drop pool and 2 more to Uber Adzeri's. One of which is the Adzeri's Rule Judgment Staff, which prevents you from being stunned or having your damage reflected. It grants a skill that alternates between Flames of Judgment and Storm of Judgment when used, as if you absorbed the powers of Adzeri herself. Skipping forward to 2016's release of Ascendancy, we have made some changes to how you receive your Labyrinth Enchantments. Previously, when you completed the labyrinth and went to enchant an item, you couldn't see what random result you'd get. Now, the result for each type of enchantment is shown to you in advance so you can make the right choice. In the Eternal Labyrinth, you're now offered 3 different helmet enchantments to pick between, in addition to the boots and gloves. This will make it a lot easier to find enchantments relevant to the skills you're using and to apply them to appropriate items. In 3.14, we're going to stop giving out unique jewels for each day's fastest labyrinth runs, and we have added these jewels as very rare drops that you might find in the labyrinth's final reward chests. Another highly requested labyrinth-related improvement is that you can now consume an offering to the goddess and the map device to open portals directly to a random trial. This greatly accelerates the speed at which you can find your final trials. We have also added 2 new labyrinth-specific unique items, including the Scales of Justice unique shield, which rewards building your character with a careful balance of life and mana. If used correctly, you'll be granted protection from shock and ignite, as well as additional fire damage. Kadira Perandus now has a much larger selection of unique item rewards. We have also rebalanced all sources of Perandus coins so that Perandus content is still the best place to get them from. A craft introduced in Harvest kinda destroyed the Perandus coin economy, so we're absolutely fixing that at the same time. Essences have been numerically rebalanced, and are in general stronger than they were before. Screaming Essences can now be used to reroll rare items, in addition to their capability to upgrade items to rare. The 4 Corrupted Essences have had some of their less useful outcomes improved or replaced. Now, the only way to get the powerful upgrade-only top-tier Essences is through Remnants of Corruption, which come from Essence content. Blessings, the currency used to upgrade Breach uniques, can now be used to upgrade Breach stones between tiers also. Abyss jewels have been rebalanced and are on average more powerful than they were before. We have also buffed Abyss chests to make sure that they are the best place to get Abyss jewels. We have also introduced Abyss Scarabs and have added 4 new Abyss-specific unique jewels, such as Tekrod's Gaze, a murderous eye jewel that increases your main hand critical strike chance and your offhand critical strike multiplier based on how many murderous eye jewels you have equipped. Another example is the Ulaman's Gaze Searching Eye Jewel, which counts how many Searching Eye Jewels you have equipped and grants your projectiles a chance to be able to chain when colliding with terrain proportional to this number. These unique jewels have a chance to drop from any of the unique encounters at the end of the Abyssal Depths, and these encounters are now by far the most reliable way to obtain a Stygian Vice belt. We have added a handful of new beastcrafts, such as add a mod to a map, or add a mod to an influenced item, which consume existing beasts. There are some other aspects of beastcrafting that we've been keeping our eye on for a while, and we're taking this opportunity to rework them, so that high-level gameplay is less reliant on obtaining certain beastcrafts. Now, when you use a splitting beastcraft recipe on an item, both copies are marked as split, which prevents them from being split again. You cannot imprint split items. One of my favorite reward changes in this expansion is that Incursion's Temple of Atsuatl can now be itemized. Once you have access to the map device, Alva can turn your completed and ready-to-run temple into a tradable object that can be consumed in the map device. This means that players can specialize in either making temples to trade to other players, or trading for temples that are ready for them to run. There have also been a lot of changes to the temple. As you may know, specific rooms in the Temple of Atsuatl can drop unique incursion items that can be later upgraded. Many of these base unique items have been improved in this update. Previously, the temple's boss, the Omnitect, dropped random rare items with special incursion mods on them. Now it also drops rare items with incursion mods based around the themes of the rooms your temple contains. Higher tier rooms cause more rare items. Specific rooms now add specific monster packs to the temple, which results in more monster density, challenge, and reward. Temple mods have been buffed so that if your temple has more high-tier rooms, then it's equivalent to a good map. We have performed a modernization pass on rewards from temple rooms so that they're competitive with rewards from newer leagues. The explosives room also contains some basic chests that can be opened with flash powder kegs if you don't need them for opening a path elsewhere in the temple. Delve has had a big increase to early rewards and a reduction to the quantity of high-tier rewards spawning at very deep depths. The end result is that Delve is a lot more rewarding for almost everyone, but a few extreme players who delve very deep will not be getting quite so rich from it. A big problem with rewards and Betrayal is that players deem it not worthwhile to kill Katarina, because it resets your Betrayal Syndicate board. In this expansion, we have massively increased the incentive for doing this. Now if you manage to kill Katarina, all Syndicate members drop their rewards at 1 tier higher than they previously would. This change required the introduction of a new 4th tier of reward from each Syndicate member and encourages the use of a larger variety of Syndicate targets and Safe House leaders. We have improved rewards that were not as interesting or valuable as the best ones. For cases where we deemed rewards too powerful, we moved them to tier 4 rather than nerfing them. The tier 4 rewards are approximately twice as powerful as tier 3 ones were. We have also added a new unique item to Katarina's drop pool as further incentive for killing her. The Cane of Kulamak drops only from Katarina. Similar to Paradoxica, it has 3 veiled modifiers that must be unveiled one at a time via Jun. This means that each version of the cane could be entirely different, and because of the way the veiled modifier system works, you have the chance to get 3 mods that potentially synergize extremely well, or maybe just a crazy bag of mods that don't work together. Furthermore, the cane itself scales up the magnitudes of any unveiled modifiers on it. We have made some changes to how unveiling mods works. You still get offered a choice of 3 mods, but these are now more powerful versions of the existing ones. The powerful ones are unveiled onto items, and the normal versions are the ones you unlock that can be crafted onto items. Also, progress towards unlocking crafting of veiled mods is at a slightly faster rate than before. Some very powerful veiled modifiers are now only available at their original strength on the unveiled version of the modifier, and the crafted version of the modifier has been lowered in power. Earlier in the presentation, I alluded to the new Veiled Chaos Orb as an item that has been added to Path of Exile's core drop pool. This new currency item rerolls the target item with new mods, like a regular Chaos Orb does, but one mod is guaranteed to be a Veiled mod. While it can drop from any monster or chest in the game, by far the most effective way of getting it is from Isling and some Betrayal safe houses. We have introduced 3 new types of incubators, for Blight, Metamorph, and Delirium, and have modernized the rewards from the other incubators. The item yield from chests and blighted maps is now affected by a portion of the map item's quantity, giving you a reason to roll your blighted maps if you can handle the additional challenge. Anointments to blighted maps have been rebalanced and reworked so that each has its own purpose and with a consistent increase in reward as the oils get rarer. This is basically entirely buffs, because one big nerf we needed to do was already done last league. You can now corrupt blighted maps. These can very rarely drop the new tainted oil, which allows you to apply anointments to corrupted items. We have also introduced blighted scarabs. We have added 2 new types of catalysts themed around speed and critical strikes respectively. These new catalysts are rarer than previous ones. As discussed in the recent development manifesto, the current 3.13 version of Harvest is too rewarding, so we're rebalancing its crafting and also increasing how often you'll encounter portals to the Sacred Grove. The current version spams you with way too many crafts, so each seed has a chance to grant a craft now, reducing the overall number of crafts you can perform per garden, though you will encounter the grove 60% more than you did before. Some of the most powerful crafting options have been removed or changed. The Heart of the Grove encounter is now a map fragment that can randomly drop from tier 4 harvest bosses instead of rarely replacing the entire grove when it spawns. With the release of Ultimatum, Ritual will be added to the core game, with a chance to occur in each map you play. It has also been added to the Atlas passive skill tree system and is available as a Sextant mod. Almost every time we release a league, we later roll it into the core game with a chance to spawn in maps, usually 10%, sometimes 5%. When Ritual is added to the core game, we are standardizing this rate at 8%, which means a small decrease for some leagues and an increase for Harvest. We have rebalanced other things to compensate, like the rate at which Heist Rogues level up. Most Atlas passive trees have the same increase in chance for bonus content, meaning they now offer more than double the chance of encountering your preferred content. So I just spent a ton of time describing lots of buffs to Path of Exile's different reward systems, and there was one nerf that I left to last. And that's because it's a nerf to a league that I kind of care about a bit. Talisman was one that I kind of led the design on, and players joke that it's my favorite league. Now, in the 3.12.3 content update, there was a change to Talismans. Basically, they weren't good enough, so the team decided to add a random anointment to them, which made them a lot more powerful, and also to juice up the mods to make them well-rolled. And that was overkill. Like, as you've seen recently, Talismans have just been dropping with insane mods and great anointments. And we felt in this expansion, especially because you can use tainted oils in order to redo the anointments on Talismans, because now you can modify corrupted amulets. Honestly, they don't need the well-rolled mods anymore, and so we've removed that. Talismans are still compelling, but they're not quite where they were in the last.
Das letzte Mal, als ich gespielt habe, waren Talismane einfach
Every Path of Exile expansion needs new ways for players to slaughter their enemies. In Path of Exile Ultimatum, this takes the form of 4 new skill gems and 4 support gems. In line with Ultimatum's Val theme, these gems focus on blood. The idea is spending life rather than mana to use your skills. Alongside the new skill and support gems, we've also made some adjustments to the low life mechanic, including changing the low life threshold to 50%. This makes it much easier and safer to stay on low life for builds where it matters. Typically when players create low life builds, they rely on Energy Shield to protect themselves against incoming damage. The new skill Petrified Blood enables low life builds to instead use some of their life pool to absorb hits. While it's active, you can't recover life above 50% through any method other than flasks. Sources of life recovery like life regeneration and life leech only apply to the bottom half of your life pool. Additionally, a portion of incoming hit damage that affects the lower half of your life pool is spread out over time rather than being applied instantly. Corrupting Fever consumes a chunk of your life and grants you a buff that causes all your hits to apply Corrupted Blood to your enemies. Corrupted Blood stacks up with each hit, causing more and more physical damage over time. When you have consumed a certain amount of life to cast skills from your life pool, the buff's duration refreshes. Essentially, as long as you're consuming life to use skills, you'll be causing damage over time to stack on enemies. Be careful though. The Exsanguinate skill shoots tendrils of blood in front of you at the cost of life rather than mana. In addition to a strong physical damage hit, it also applies a physical damage over time debuff which can stack up to 3 times. You can also support Exsanguinate so that its tendrils chain from one target to the next. Reap conjures a giant bloody scythe that swings across a selected area, applying strong hit damage and physical damage over time. Each use of the skill causes it to gain a charge that scales its damage up and increases its life cost up to 5 times. These charges drop off over time as well as after killing enemies, making Reap very powerful at stacking up damage against single targets. We've also added 2 new support gems that have split the existing blood magic support into 2 separate support gems. The first of these is the Arrogance support, which causes supported skills to reserve life instead of mana, and also provides an increase to the effect of auras that it supports. Just like the original blood magic support gem, the reservation multiplier diminishes as the gem levels up. The Life Tap support gem causes supported skills to cost life instead of mana. Once you've consumed a certain amount of life to use a skill, you gain Life Tap, which increases your damage for a few seconds. The Cruelty support gem grants a buff called Cruelty, which increases the damage over time you deal with supported skills. It also boosts the hit damage from supported skills, and the Cruelty buff gets stronger the harder you hit. This gem is designed as an additional option for builds that focus on both hits and damage over time.
Yeah.
The Bloodthirst support gem is a new option for low life attackers. This gem adds a percentage of your life as physical weapon damage while you're on low life, letting low life attack based builds really scale their damage, which wasn't an option before. Alongside a Val-themed expansion and blood-themed gems, it felt right to take the opportunity to improve Val skills, which are supercharged versions of regular gems that charge up with the souls of your slain enemies to deal huge bursts of damage. One of the main improvements is that you now get far more souls for Val skills from damaging unique enemies, so your Val skills will recharge faster against bosses.
Nice.
We've also
Okay,
improved the
that's
Atziri's
That's
Reign
good.
unique jewel. Alongside increasing the duration of your Val skills, it also grants a chance to regain all consumed souls. Val skills have also received a balance pass that you can check out in the full Path of Exile Ultimatum patch notes in a few days. So we've covered most of the key components that make up Path of Exile Ultimatum. Keep an eye on the news over the next week as we reveal the finer details of what's coming. We'll move on to the Q&A shortly to answer your burning questions, but first let's have a quick look at the new supporter packs that are available right now to celebrate the launch of Ultimatum and help fund ongoing development of Path of Exile. The Silver Crescent and Imperial Sun supporter packs come with masses of points to spend in the store, social frames,
das sieht geil
forum
aus.
titles and badges, a download of the digital soundtrack, and of course exclusive cosmetic microtransactions such as armor sets, alternate helmets, and weapon skins. The Silver Crescent series has an exclusive portal effect and the Imperial Sun series has an exclusive aura effect. Each series has 2 packs, and the smaller packs can be upgraded to their respective large pack anytime while they're still on sale. These are of course in addition to the new core packs that were released at the end of last year. Remember to check those out if you haven't already. Thank you so much for your support. Purchases of these supporter packs are the only thing that fund ongoing development of Path of Exile, its sequel Path of Exile 2, and expansions like Ultimatum. The reveals we showed you today are already live on YouTube for you to link to your friends in case they missed the live stream. Please do so, we're keen to get a big turnout on the release of Ultimatum next week. And we've got plenty more reveals planned for the rest of the year. There's a lot more Path of Exile 2 stuff to show off, and we've also got some new progress on Path of Exile Mobile we're keen to share with you as well. Anyway, if you have any questions from what we've shown you today, please get them ready because I'm about to be joined by Ziggy D as we do a Q&A based on your questions from Twitch chat.
Okay, cool. Ich bin gespannt. Ich bin tatsächlich gespannt. Gut, Talismane, ich habe das nicht mitgekriegt, was die damit gemacht haben. Weil die waren immer useless. Was will ich mit den Dingern? ein Corrupted, beschissene Mods drauf. Ich habe noch nie einen sinnvollen gesehen. Das haben sie wohl ein bisschen Overkill gemacht. Aber gut. Kann man mal ändern, ne? Okay. Also gut, das Path of Exile 2 sieht super aus. Effekte, mega. Stimmung, also hier die Atmosphäre, mega. Animation, super. Was mir echt auf den Keks ging, war dieses Ice Bolt. Penetrating Bolt. Firebolt. Ice Bolt. Firebolt. Ice Bolt. Also, das müssen sie abschaltbar machen. Das geht. Also überleg mal, ihr spielt das am Tag 6 Stunden am Stück. Kriegt ihr Albträume von dem Mist. Also, da geht ja gar nichts. Sonst sein Bolts. Bin mal gespannt, ob sie das abschalten. Dann, Lootfilter, Auto-Loot, in-game konfigurierbar. Gibt's sowas? Ist ja natürlich, das wäre natürlich, fucking überragend. Das wäre tatsächlich absolut überragend.
G'day folks, and welcome back to another very exciting reveal and Q&A session with the one and only Chris Wilson. Good morning, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How are you feeling about the reactions so far?
I'm pretty hyped, actually. That was a lot of stuff to cover, and it was really cool watching Twitch chat.
Yeah, this method of doing the reveals, how are you liking it? It seems like last time, it was jam-packed full of stuff, and there's almost like not a second to breathe between different things, so it's a lot to digest.
Yeah, I like this method of showing stuff and getting a chance to discuss it and explain things, and it's quite personal to get a chance to like interact with the community about the actual to dumping the information on our website and then reading Reddit. So it's a lot more fun.
Ah, that's good stuff. So I'm going to jump straight into PoE2 things first. Yep. The ones that stood out to me were definitely spears and crossbows. Mm-hmm. Two things that I've been very excited to potentially see in PoE one day. I remember asking years and years ago whether we'd get stuff like spears and crossbows, and it was kind of like always a maybe, probably not. It's a lot of work to make the animations for new things like that. So how come what led to the decision to add 2 new weapon types to PoE 2?
Well, you mentioned animations, and that's actually part of the reason. So previously, the old way we were creating animations in Path of Exile, where the way the character rigs were set up, just made it really hard to add a lot of new ones. But one of the things with Path of Exile 2 is we can quite trivially add a lot more animations to the characters. And so new weapon types are totally fair game, and we've got some interesting ideas there. And of course, Spears and Crossbows are both iconic action RPG ones that we hadn't done yet, so it makes sense to put them in PoE too.
I imagine that new rigging system then makes it easier to make more skills, but also more interesting and dynamic skills potentially.
Absolutely, and this custom animation for each skill, basically. A lot of the Path of Exile 1 skills will use whatever animation is appropriate. Sometimes new animations, of course, but it's often kind of the closest animation we have, whereas in PoE 2, we're pretty much animating everything we can by hand.
Awesome stuff. Now, chat, we have some pre-prepared questions to give you time to formulate and ask some questions, but do ask questions in chat. We have some helpful people in the background taking questions, which we'll ask after some ones that I've already prepared. So firstly, asking about Spears and Crossbows further, they each have implicit skills. How many of these are there?
So this is a number that keeps on growing. We basically showed you the ones we've got working so far, and we expect that to grow, of course, by release. So we have a reasonable stable for each. In terms of the crossbow ones, for example, there's currently 2 main skills that are built into the crossbows you've seen. We hope to add several more. So there's the Cascade one and Power Shot. There'll be several more damage shapes coming. And then in terms of damage types, we showed you 3 types of bolts. And yes, I understand that the sound of changing between them got annoying in the video, but this is something we're experimenting with, and if we keep it in, it will definitely be an option.
Ja, aber hat's gemerkt.
That's actually an homage to the 2012 Dread movie, so, we find it funny at least. Anyway, there's 3 of those ammo types working in the game at the moment, but we'll clearly add a lot more, and so the exponential number of final combinations will be pretty high.
So did you say like 7 damage shapes?
There's 2 damage shapes currently. That's the Cascade and the Power Shot, and we're looking to add several more. So several rather than 7. But that that could be quite a high number overall. Basically, we want to find ones that fit themes for base types of crossbows, and so ideally the end game crossbows will support several of these damage shapes at quite high skill levels, and so you'll have a lot of choice as to what you want to use in your end game build.
Sehr cool.
Interesting. Cool. This is a pretty interesting distinction between like the damage shapes and the damage types. So I guess this is the first like modular skills like that. Like you could always convert damage types or add different types of damage and stuff like that, but these are the first like skills are effectively they're in 2 separate parts. So the support gems also linked to the bolts, the damage type aspect of it, and not the actual damage shape thing, the bolt itself.
Yeah.
Or the power shot. Gotcha. And that's because of the new skill gem system, obviously, which now grants skills based on the item sockets, and then you socket into a completely separate menu, which saw some glimpses of there, which I'm really looking forward to seeing how that plays out.
Okay.
Is this concept of like unique weapon skills going to be extended out to other weapon types?
It may do. We're still working out what we're doing with each one of the weapon types, and there's a lot of interesting ideas there. Some of them will probably gain skills, some of them will just have other ways to identify themselves. I'll give you another example. So you know how in Path of Exile at the moment, daggers and claws are basically the same thing, right? They're both dex and they, use similar types of skills and so on. So an example of the small tweak we're making there is that claws will count for unarmed skills in Path of Exile 2. So all of the unarmed builds can now use claws. And if you've ever played, Facebreak, you'll understand quite a bit of potential there. And so we're trying where possible to make smart decisions with the base types. But of course, if we had to add a lot of work to them to make them unique, then we'll definitely do so.
Wow, okay. I'm seeing a few questions already about kind of like distinctions between PoE 1 and PoE 2 here. People asking things like, does that mean spears and crossbows can't be used in PoE 1?
So that's tricky because it's technically possible to get Path of Exile 2 items on your Path of Exile 1 characters in the end game because of the shared end game nature of it. And so if we don't have animation support for the old character classes, we're still working out what to do there. It's one of the problems we're going to have to solve.
Right, okay. And on that note, I guess, how will we be handling accommodating new weapon types in the existing skill tree as well? It's getting big.
Right. So from a skill tree point of view, we haven't announced what we're doing yet with Path of Exile 2's skill tree. There's going to be some interesting stuff. And of course, it's going to accommodate all the weapon types it supports. It may be that Path of Exile 1 characters and hence their skill tree don't necessarily support the new weapon types, and you have to play a Path of Exile 2 character to get them. But we kind of expect that by the time that Path of Exile 2 is out and ready, a lot of people are going to be choosing to play Path of Exile 2 characters because of the vast amount of new content there.
Achso, das heißt mit Shared Endgame meinen die tatsächlich.
Kind of like further on the note between PoE 1 and PoE 2, will the existing campaign be like just a direct one-to-one port, or will it be seeing like PoE 2 upgrades applied to it as well retroactively?
Okay.
And for like, I guess, how long will it be supported in the future in that way?
Right. So, one second. I just got a note, by the way, on the last question from the team that all of the existing Path of Exile 1 characters are going to be swapped over to use the Path of Exile 2 rigs, which adds full support for using spears and crossbows on them. So that's information I did not know, which is actually very helpful, and the team have obviously thought of that.
Makes sense.
With regard to the campaign itself, we're incidentally getting upgrades whenever we improve assets that are used in both campaigns. We want, where possible, to take the best of Path of Exile 1 and improve it for Path of Exile 2. And so when we do that, it upgrades it in Path of Exile 1. And so there are also places where we intentionally revamp Path of Exile 1 stuff, like what we did with Lionized Watch. And so the campaign will continue to receive improvements in this way. It's still a fully maintained game. Like, it's a product that we are monetizing and maintaining and, treat with pride and confidence and stuff. But at the same time, we're intentionally putting most of our development efforts into making a new Path of Exile 2 campaign that fixes, perceived problems with the way the Path of Exile works. And so it'll be a bit of a patchwork quilt, I suspect, in a few years, where some of the content will date back to the early 2000s, 2010s, and some of it will be brand new.
Okay.
I look forward to seeing how it evolves alongside
ich hätte
2's
es halt
campaign
so
then.
gern, dass ich den
A lot of
ganzen
people noted that
Leveling-Prozess skippen kann.
the stream showed like quite a slowdown in content in PoE 2, and it was talked about previously that it will be a bit of a pullback in terms of overall game speed. Is that still the case? Where are you looking to kind of pitch the speed of PoE 2 compared to PoE 1?
We want
How is
Path
it
of
currently?
Exile 2 to be a slightly more claustrophobic personal experience, but we understand that when presented with that, players find ways to make their characters go fast, because after all, these games are measured on what items you find, and that's in direct proportion to how many monsters you kill,
Ja,
and that's
vor
in
allem
direct proportion to how
es
fast you
ist
can
auch,
go. And so, yes, it is a
es
game where
gibt ja
people end
auch
up going
dann
fast. All of the crazy
Juwelen, wie
character
schnell,
builds
je
and
nachdem,
more are
wie
still
schnell ihr
possible,
einen
so
Dungeon
I
schafft,
would
ne?
rather expect that Path of Exile's speed continues to be a high-speed game once we hit the end game and people get their character builds established. But we still have to try as hard as possible to make it a compelling experience for people that want to play at a normal pace as well. And so while we played at a normal pace through that particular showcase there, it's possible to run through, right? You can, be very smart about which monsters you kill. You can do the whole thing rather quickly if you're a racer. So yes, we're trying to make things a bit slower, but we're not doing it in a way that's going to hurt the spirit of Path of Exile, because we understand how people like to play and we want to support that.
Right. I remember hearing that both campaigns would be roughly similar length, and the new one's 7x compared to 10x. So I imagine things like boss fights and certain encounters and stuff like that will be like more difficult and longer than comparable encounters in the previous campaign. Then, right?
Yeah, and that's partly because when we were making the mini bosses in Path of Exile 1, it was literally a matter of, let's take a bandit and let's scale it up and give it a name and throw heavy strike on it, and that's a boss, if you see what I mean. Let's take a rower and retexture it and put an aura on, and that's a boss. Whereas here we're planning them into the levels. We think of an idea for a level and say, what would be the coolest thing we can put in this level? And then we build that in. And so it means the boss fights are significantly more complicated and interesting. And I don't expect that's going to slow players down a lot, because we're not like throwing invulnerability phases into those mini bosses necessarily. But, there's certainly going to be interesting fights at the very least.
And it was talked about making bosses more rewarding as well. Do you think like the average boss in PoE 2, since they're going to be harder, is also potentially going to be more rewarding as well?
We want to make sure the rewards are pitched at a good level there, and the changes to the rewards of bosses in Path of Exile 1 is just making sure it's worth your time actually going and farming them. If you go and do an Act 10 Katava run, we want it so that you actually get some decent items, and it's worth repeating that process when gearing up for maps. Now, of course, it's probably still more profitable to just go and play maps, but some people want to just get themselves ready before they start expending currency on every area they run.
I do have a bit of a nostalgia for like farming Piety and Dominus back in the earlier days of PoE 2, PoE, so it'd be interesting to see if there's more of that in PoE 2, or even sooner, I guess, since a lot of these changes are coming very soon. Matarik asks, will Path of Exile 2 be sticking to a 3-month league-based cycle like PoE 1, or is there any intentions to change this at this point?
We're pretty happy with the 3-month cycle. It's a good duration. We haven't decided, obviously, yet, and it depends a little bit on when Path of Exile 2 is coming out and how it works around dates that year. But yeah, we do expect to continue the league cycle, and it will be quite nice actually getting to make the first leagues for Path of Exile 2 and designing those, because it'll be a fresh game where we can find things that integrate really well into it, and that's going to be quite interesting.
Cheesy asks, will there be any options to like reduce graphics for PoE 2, since it's looking like a much prettier game? Is it going to be a bit harder on like PC hardware than the current game?
It certainly has higher requirements, but we're looking into various technology like dynamic level of detail stuff and various other bits and pieces. And a lot of the engine improvements that have been made over the last few years are with a view to us basically never dropping frame rate and finding smart ways, like the dynamic resolution scaling and various other bits and pieces. If you're IO bound, for example, it uses placeholder textures and so on. And it's a fine balance, of course, between making sure this performs well and always looks good. But the intention is that we can run Path of Exile 2 on a wide variety of systems.
We saw a lot of really nice looking UI improvements in the PoE2 trailers. I especially liked the boss bars and even for separate boss bars next to each other and dynamically changing and stuff like that was really cool. Is there going to be more UI customization in the future for PoE? Especially something that's, I guess, bothered me in the past is like not being able to do more customization for things like buffs and debuffs and change which things are displayed and their locations.
I suspect that if we were to make changes like that, we'd look into rolling it into Path of Exile as soon as they're ready. But it's a difficult line between deciding the right place for the players they can focus on playing versus allowing full customization. And we kind of prefer to just let players get on with playing the game and not allow them to completely change their UI. And this is for a few other reasons as well. From a branding point of view, it's nice if the game looks consistent on each person's computer. And I know that sounds like marketing speak, but it is something where we want to make sure that the game is recognizable by Path of Exile. In addition, from a quality assurance point of view, having it so that there's an infinitely commutable UI, of course, makes it significantly harder for us to test patches. But these are all things we have to balance against the actual usability, and we do like the idea of adding more QOL there. From a UI point of view, by the way, I'd encourage viewers to have another look at the UI, like the HUD in the footage we just showed, because there's some interesting technology used there that I'm going to see if they can notice.
Was it the pretty boy around the health bar? Or something else.
That's one of the many benefits. We're rendering it in 3D now, so there's some very interesting lighting stuff.
Yeah, that's
very nice. Yeah, I saw some interesting lighting changes and some green stuff swooshing over the UI. That might be what you're hinting at, actually, because that's something I noticed, but I didn't know what it was about. Anyway, time to scrub over the VODs. Well, after the Q&A. Bathtub Raccoon is asking basically if we're going to be getting more of the integration of things like trading UIs and stuff like that in game, and also similarly the ideas that were talked about in the past about having the possibility of transferring items like across instances and stuff like that, cross instance trading.
The change that's most likely to come is an integration of the trade websites into the game client, where people can basically interact with stuff more easily without actually having to leave the game. And that means that, for example, if you see an item in the in-game trade site browser as such, you can click on it to whisper the person directly without having to copy and paste stuff around. That's more likely is the direction that we're going to go. We've talked about our views on trade for quite a while, about how it is important that there are some barriers to instant acquisition of items in order to encourage players to actually play the game to find items while still being able to trade if they want to. And our views on that are still pretty similar. So we don't expect to, put it this way, if we were going to dramatically revamp how trade works, we'd just do it. We wouldn't wait until Path of Exile 2.
I'd like to talk a little bit about Ultimatum. It's on the surface, it looks quite similar to Ritual. I noticed a lot of people pointing that out. What are the key differences in your mind between Ultimatum and Ritual then?
Well, the similarity that we have here is that it's a in-area combat league where you encounter the encounter and then fight some monsters and get some rewards. And this is as opposed to going on a grand heist or collecting, beasts, for example. And so that's kind of where the similarities end, though, because after that point, the difference is that Ultimatum gives you a very fine granular control over the difficulty and reward that you're getting. So you have the ability to add up to, I'm going to say up to 10, because that's where it goes in the end game, but usually 6 up to 10 modifiers to the fight that are your choice. You're presented with different options. If you don't want a certain constraint, you just don't have to add that one. And so you're kind of customizing the fight by essentially adding mods that further make it more difficult. And if you're lucky, you'll get an Ultimatum run where the mods don't affect your character in a particularly negative way and you have an easier time. Sometimes you're just fighting through a slog of really hard stuff. And so the rewards escalate kind of exponentially here. Like the intention here isn't that you just make your way through the 6 to 10 rounds pretty easily and get your 6 to 10 rewards and walk away. The intention is it gets difficult and you have to make a choice of actually stopping. And we want it so even good players while playing through the campaign will reach a point where they say, okay, I've just got to take this stuff and leave. I can't risk the next round because there's an actual 50% chance that I'm going to screw it up and lose all my stuff. And so this is the first league that people are going to be failing encounters even if they know how to play the game. And that's because they can choose how far they want to take it. Which is different than Ritual, because in Ritual it's expected that you're going to kill the monsters, you're going to get your rewards. Here, the rewards are a lot better, but will you get them?
I do like those risk reward leagues where you get to have a bit more of a gamble. You pointed out like the idea of the Vile thing being the potential of loss. On the note of loss, some of the reward choices were things like put an exalt in and or a stack of exalts or something and then double it. Woody Carrot actually asks how rare are the doubling the currency ultimatums?
I'm going to ask the team that, guys. How rare are the inscribed ultimatums?
It's around any maps pretty variable.
Right, so there's a lot of variety in what they reward. You obviously want the ones that double a lot of currency, but you're generally finding an inscribed ultimatum approximately every 20 maps. I should note, of course, that that number will probably change by the time it's released. We're right now with a week to go, tweaking that number on an hourly basis, basically, as we playtest. In addition, these things are tradable. So it's one of those things where a lot of people, when they get one, are going to say, you put 5 exalts in, get 10 out. Therefore, it's worth up to 5 exalts profit. I'm going to sell it for 4. And then they list it. And then someone else is like, well, that's an easy 1 exalt profit for me to get that and just do it because their character is a god. And so we're expecting a lot of people to just dump them on the economy for sale and a lot of people to just buy these up for easy profits because they know they can handle those mods.
I was a little concerned that you might not have the thing for the ritual, but it seems like every ritual that requires you to put something in is one of those itemized ones that you can prepare for and only run when you have the requirement.
The ultimatums that have a specific thing you have to bring are itemized ones, so you know this is going to require, like, for example, there's some that upgrade a good unique to an incredibly good unique, and so it might say bring this item and get out a calms or something like that, and therefore you just have to trade for the item when you've got the inscribed ultimatum.
Bring what item and get out of calms? Sorry, I'm just...
Well, it'll depend. There are pools that it picks from, and so sometimes you'll get ones that are close in value, sometimes you get ones with a big difference in value, and those are obviously worth more.
Oh, so there's actually things like it requires a specific unique that you can hunt down and then put in.
Usually with a value difference between the two that's considerable. But our goal is basically, it's got the feeling of double or nothing on those kind of ultimatums.
Nice. Awesome. Waras 8 asks, will the other skills get reworked, buffed, nerfed this time around, or is there any mechanical nerf to existing things?
Is that in reference to regular skills in the core game with the ultimatum release?
Yeah.
We do have the usual patch notes coming out, but we try to cover basically just new stuff that we were doing with regard to skills. I don't know the extent of the changes to the other stuff. I will quickly check. Guys, regular skill changes. There's some nerfs and a couple of buffs, so
Classic.
Seeing what people think about that. But no, I mean, nerfs are obviously for a reason. It's to keep the game good, and we, philosophically on that, we would rather gently nerf things that are right at the top than have to fundamentally change the entire game to achieve the same balance thing in a roundabout way that players don't notice for a while. So it is a much more direct approach that we're taking these days. If something is just breaking the game through power, we'll cut a little bit off the top. Generally, whenever we do that, we're thinking it's still really good. Why are people so angry? And then they settle down after they've actually used it. So we are trying to make sure that the nerfs are just taking a bit of the power off the top and keeping the thing viable and fun still.
There was a new unique that had like a ton of keystones on it, including one new keystone, which I'm guessing we'll have to wait to see what that's all about, right?
Yep.
Are the other keystones on that item random, or are they set?
They're a set of keystones. This is a group of Vile keystones that work in interesting ways together, kind of like a puzzle for people to solve. So it'll be quite interesting to see how people work out how to play that character.
So it's like a hand-tailored character build challenge that the devs are putting forward to the community.
Think of it as like a designer's cut version of Path of Exile. This is the true way to play, right?
So CI Eldritch Battery, got it. Very nice. Moving down a little bit. Lexay wants to know, will like map mods affect ultimatums that you find, or I further addendums to that. What sort of things do affect ultimatums?
So guys, what mods affect ultimatums? They're asking about like map mods, for example.
When you run it inside the map, the itemized one, Inscribed Ultimatum, they aren't affected by any map. They just have a bonus to
Right. So it works pretty much how you would expect. If you're playing a regular map that has mods, then the ultimatum that you find in that map, just a regular one, will be fully affected by the mods. The inscribed ones are their own maps unto themselves, and so they don't have map mods because they're not rollable, but they do have a bonus to make them equivalent to decent maps.
Right. I imagine there's probably going to be some pretty brutal combinations and certain added damage types with certain modifiers that the actual ultimatums in maps give as well, since I noticed there's
Yes,
various things like
that's correct.
swords appearing and skewering you.
Yeah,
Stuff
this
like
is
that.
very much about actually reading the mods and making sure your character can handle it, right? There'll be ultimatums where you want to get a friend to help because that friend is kind of impervious to whatever it is that's going to make it hard for you. And as we mentioned, we've made party play actually work really well this time as opposed to being an afterthought.
I'm very excited about that concept actually as well. I've been playing most of the recent leagues co-op with my partner, and yeah, it's a mixed bag. Some leagues are really good for co-op, and others just kind of don't exactly work.
Ja, aber
So it seems like there's been a
ich
lot
will zum
of
Beispiel kaum
thought
Koop.
there.
Also,
Just to kind
so
of
gut wie nie, ne?
clarify, each person gets their own separate rewards effectively from it, and they can like tap out and take their reward whenever they want, or they can
Yes,
continue
that's
resting.
correct.
If someone does tap out, can they like stay in the area and help you finish your fight? But they're just like their reward sequence ends. I imagine that's how it
My
works.
understanding is they're teleported outside it. Let me check.
In the regular game, they can still.
Right. Okay, so in the regular game, they can still help you out.
But they have to leave the map if it's the inscribed ones, then I'm guessing.
Yeah, how does it work with Inscribed?
Inscribed one only the person puts the inscription gets the
Got
gains
it.
the item.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I guess this was sensible and I should have worked that out. I mean, Inscribed wants that as a specific thing that you're gambling and a specific thing you're receiving. And so that's it's only that occurs, if you see what I mean. So, for example, you and I are sitting there looking at a 5 to 10 Exalt one. And so we're going to come up with 5 Exalts. We're going to put it in the window and we're going to get 10 once, regardless of the fact that there's 2 of us.
Right.
If we want to play it together and make it a bit harder, because there's multiple players, we can do. But it isn't 5 Exalts each.
Yeah, otherwise you'd have a beastery situation again where like every person in the party gets a copy of the beast and then a copy of a copy and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's scary.
I can see why you went that route then. Decoy wants to know if there is a boss fight in Ultimatum.
Maybe. I mean, watch the trailer again, I guess.
Nice. Swoovles asks, can you just leave the ring? Meaning the ultimatum ring.
My understanding is that you have to stay within the ring. Is that because it's a barrier or because it terminates
if you're outside the ring for 5 seconds, it's failing.
Right. Okay, so standing outside the ring for 5 seconds counts as failing the encounter.
Oh, so you can dip out for a little bit if you need to catch your breath and use the flask. Yeah, that's an interesting change compared to Ritual then, which had the hard barriers.
And this is also important for hardcore, of course, where when you're going to fail an encounter, it's better to do it by running away than by physically dying and losing your character.
Yeah. Often that's the correct decision. Changing tack a little bit to some of the like previous league updates, which was a lot of things that people and myself have been asking for a long time. Excited about Veiled mod changes.
Yes.
So the Veiled mods themselves are now distinct from the craftable modifiers, and they're more powerful. How much higher are their power level compared to the crafted affixes that they give you?
So the ones that you unveil onto items are almost tier 1 in power. The intention is that they're really punchy, and if you get it, you can build a good item around that. The crafted ones are lower because you get the ability to just add them at will, and so they serve the same purpose. They're just not quite as good as if you actually make the item the correct way. The amount of difference between crafted and unveiled depends a lot on the actual mod. Some of them are closer, some of them are much further away.
Okay.
Is there any ones that do like different things, like how we have some of the higher tier affixes present some new mechanic or something like that, or is it just generally like here's more physical damage, that sort of thing?
I'll just confirm that.
It's the same thing, really?
Yeah, it's the same thing with numerical differences.
Gotcha. So the Veiled Chaos Orb allows you to reroll an item and gives a Veiled modifier on the item as well.
Yes.
And unveiling that, just to clarify, does give you crafting progress as well. So it's a way of unlocking those crafts faster.
Yeah, the Veiled Chaos Orb's used for crafting and unlocking. Yep, that's correct.
It said earlier in the presentation that the Chaos Orb drops are part of the core drop pool, right? Not like a betrayal specific thing. Okay, yeah. How common are they compared to like a regular Chaos Orb?
They're not very common. You want to get them through the betrayal system if you want to target farm them essentially, but you can find them. And the core drop pool thing is more about the fact that it's worthwhile killing monsters because from time to time you will actually find one. It will be an exciting thing. But like many things in the game, there's a more deterministic way to get them. This is actually a case of we initially really wanted to have it just as a betrayal reward, but I put a strong argument forward that we want the core drop pool to be compelling, and so it was added, but not particularly often. You'll see them, just not as much as you will from betrayal.
Makes sense. Can you use the Veiled Chaos Orbs to put Veiled mods on influence bases?
Yes, you can.
Awesome. That's looking forward to some interesting crafting combos here. And can you veil chaos the character signature mods, like for example, Orion's minus mana cost?
No, you can't get those ones through that.
So those ones are still only drop only from those specific characters.
Yeah.
Okay. How many previously league specific uniques are being added to the drop pool?
Way more than the 6 that we listed. It's like 100 or something. Essentially, we looked at all the old league uniques, and there were kind of 2 ways you could get them. You could either get them by fighting content in that league, or you could get them by killing some specific boss. And all the ones that you get from specific bosses, like, Pale Council kind of stuff and so on, that stuff is still specific to those bosses. But every item that you could find by fighting league monsters that would drop because they're a monster of that league is now possible to get in the core drop pool. And so in one swoop, we have made Path of Exile's unique pool significantly more interesting in terms of stuff that you can find by just playing the regular game, while still meaning that the old leagues have their, interesting rewards.
And exactly how many headhunters am I going to find now?
So this is an interesting one, and the verdict is out on our math because on one hand, like I want to start by saying Headhunter is like clearly in the sights of the balance team of being very unhappy with how powerful this item is, right? And I am putting my foot down and saying, no, Headhunter is an iconic part of Path of Exile. We're not nerfing it. It's going to stay awesome, right? So I'm representing the community here. Headhunter stays great. But the concession here is that we don't want 47% of characters at the top of PoE.Ninja to have a Headhunter equipped. We do want to make sure that it is a valuable item that's actually aspirational. And so part of the compromise here is you can get it in the core drop pool, obviously quite infrequently, but it's also a little bit harder to get from other sources as well. So obviously there's going to be a lot more of them because you can find them from regular monsters, but there's going to be fewer of them from the various other ancillary places you can get them. And so to some extent, this balances out a bit. So randoms are going to be fighting headhunters a bit more than the dedicated players because the deterministic farming of it is harder than it was before. It takes more ancient orb uses, for example. But technically, you can just chance your way into it earlier on without having to be in Nemesis content. And so ideally, we will see Headhunter remaining a completely amazing item because it has not been nerfed and still, being a viable thing for builds. It's just a little bit more of a lottery as to whether you actually find one. And we think that's actually quite important in this kind of game because it means that a player who's not as good, not as lucky normally as other players, can just luck their way into something that gives them a ton of currency. And players who know what they're doing have plenty of deterministic options for still getting it and deterministic options for raising currency they can use to just trade for one if they need it.
I love the idea of like some first time player who's level 40 something and they find a headhunter and they just wipe it on and be like, this seems okay.
Well, that's like previously it happened with mirrors and it happened with obscure rare items they would never notice, right? But it was so cool watching some random player get something incredibly valuable and it just changes their game experience. And so we've just made sure that there's a lot of other options that they can find as well that are valuable.
Detective Jabsco asks, with the league items that have been changed to global drops, have they lost their league tags? Will you be able to chance them outside of their league now?
My understanding is that you will be able to chance items that, because they're just regularly in the global drop pool again. So my understanding is you can just chance a headhunter if you're lucky.
Okay, cool. So I'm excited to see the return of the Val Reliquary keys. I quite like those. It's sad to see them gone for quite a while. It was mentioned that they are the rarest ever added to the game. How often will we see them? How rare is the rarest
We'll
ever?
find them less often than the previous ones. And our goal here is that they are very treasured things that you find occasionally. We don't want an expectation that people play this league expecting to get a handful of these, right? They're pretty rare. And so it's a thing that you can hope to get. And if you can trade for it, that's also good. But a lot of this comes down to the fact that these ones have a different way of distributing items. In the past, we said, okay, we've got some broken stuff for you guys, like, unnerfed counts and so on in the previous ones. And we're just going to make this fair by making them incredibly unlikely to get. If you've watched videos of people opening a lot of past reliquary keys, you'll notice they don't really get the good items that often. There's a bias towards the junk. Even though foily special junk has still got value, of course, because it's a collector's item, it wasn't a particularly fair distribution. With this new Val reliquary key, we're trying a completely flat weighting, so every item has equal chances of spawning. And so while there are some fewer, less valuable items in there, there's also some very valuable Val items, especially valuable in foil, and they're equally likely. And so because of this, we're being careful and making sure it doesn't drop particularly often. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the value of these, because we would rather it be a case that even the foily worse items are still worth something from a collector point of view later, rather than just water it down.
I'm going to try and wring a little bit of detail out of you here. Is Headhunter in there? Is there a foil Headhunter?
I don't believe that Headhunter is classed as a Val item. So this is all the Val items in Path of Exile. There's quite a lot of them.
I see. Okay. Well, that's a pretty important detail for people that want to like kind of do some math on there because they'll be able to look at whatever's a vial item, count them, and then see one in how many you've got of getting specific items.
Yeah,
Since
we'll
they
have an
are
EV
flat.
chart the next day, like with Magic the Gathering sets, you know.
Nice. I look forward to reading some of that detail, seeing what things I should be hoping for. So a big change is to beast crafting, and in particular, beast item splitting. And for those of you who don't really understand or know what that was all about, effectively it was item printer go burr, but people were able to duplicate certain things ad infinitum.
Yeah.
So usually stuff like six white socket good chest bases that can then be crafted, or other like crafting stage items that can be
Du
finished
hast da
off.
Geld
And
wie
certain
Währung,
groups of people were able
häufiger.
to get together, pull resources, craft these
Ist
bases,
doch
and
nicht
then
normal.
print them for the rest of the league. So what led to this change to effectively make it so that this can't happen anymore?
Part of it is that when we initially designed the splitting stuff for beast crafting, we knew that there was some base, because with an item there's the base and there's the mods on it, and splitting will wreck your mods generally and copy the base. So in a case where the base is the hard part to get, then the splitting recipe is valuable. And so we knew what valuable bases there were in the game beforehand. It's just that that pool has increased a lot over time, and it's become incredibly abusive with stuff like, you know, watchstones and heist contracts or heist blueprints and so on, and the the really good crafted bases for crafting projects. And so this was something we were keeping an eye on. And of course, there are ways of balancing it. We could just make those beasts incredibly rare and so on, and eventually it becomes, a different way of doing a mirror. But we didn't really like that approach. So we started fighting on a specific basis of like, watchstones and heist blueprints, for example, were quite abusive. So we started toning things down there. But the cases keep cropping up. And so we feel that this change here, where you can still duplicate something one time per item, is probably a sensible way to do it. It means that we're not having to fight it on a beast rarity basis. And it still means it's a viable mechanic where if you are crafting an item, you can potentially make two of it using this method.
It kind of follows the rule of mirroring a little bit, although it does make the original effectively mirrored as well, so that it can't be split again. It can still be changed, though, obviously.
Yeah, it does prevent the cartels from continuing to print many copies of the item, which is a cool mechanic, and I really like that. But the same thing does exist in the game in other ways, like those new vendor recipes that we've added, right? Some of those have some economic impact, right? What if someone finds one of those and doesn't tell people how it's done? They just start making the item you get from it.
That's often
It'd be real interesting to see if certain things spike in value in the trade economy, unexplainably. Hint, hint.
I'm sure the trade cartels will be okay and find a way to make some money still.
Yeah, I should note that it's still worth, like, if you get a great watchstone with really good sextants on it, it's probably still worth splitting it, because that way you get to essentially duplicate the sextants that way. So there's still quite a lot of uses.
You just can't do it for the rest of the league. So on talismans, and kind of like looping into this is the idea of like the value of dropped rare items as well. So it's changed now so that they drop anointed, but they don't use the affix rolling 2.0 system, which caused them to drop a lot better. Now, thanks to the new affix rolling system, alongside the like implicits that talismans have implicitly, and the random anointments, which could be really good ones, really valuable ones, the effect was that talismans became one of the few rare items that I was like really interested in looking at on the ground and picking up and looting and potentially being an upgrade as opposed to crafting or trading
Ja gut, mit
for my
Talismans muss
upgrades.
echt
There seems to be a bit of a
heftig gewesen
goal
sein.
that Pee Wee's striving for, to have rares become more relevant again. So I'm curious why the like pullback away from the loot 2.0 system for talismans then.
So there's a couple. The first thing to note is that the well-rolled mods thing isn't meant to be a loot 2.0 thing, right? The well-rolled mods thing is not for it's not the item decluttering system, which is a separate thing that we've got going on. It was implemented for heist because when you finished an entire heist and you get offered one or several rare items to pick from, we want to make sure that they're not just complete trash, because it is true that you can look through quite a lot of rares before you find something. So it's a lever that's available for us changing how drops spawn. With talismans, the original intent of a talisman is that it has a powerful implicit mod and it has random with normal weightings, explicit mods that cannot be changed. It's corrupted, right? So the normal experience with a talisman is you find one that's got a good implicit and you're using it because of the good implicit. The explicit mods are going to be worse than what you have on a regular amulet, because that's just how talismans work. And of course, the god talismans are the ones where you get a good implicit and also luckily get good explicit mods on it. So that's the original design intent for the item. Now, we found that, like, obviously people weren't using these and they didn't like them, and our options were to just dramatically increase the implicits on them. But we realized, oh, well, we've got this concept of anointments, why don't we throw those on? And so we added anointments, hoping that it would make talismans usable. And I guess somewhat defensively, the decision was made to also juice the mods a bit, because that's new tech that we had available, which certainly helped. But that's basically data that we have now. We know we don't need to actually do that. And we have to be careful with how we generate rare items in the future, because this is all working towards the grand decluttering project, which involves us essentially generating multiple rares and picking the best as far as the mods go. And there's no need for us to double dip here with talismans. As you say, talismans were an incredibly exciting thing to find because you were very likely to get an upgrade, far more likely than any other type of item in the game, because they were just so skewed towards good ones. And that's bad from an expectations point of view, and also it's just different to all the other items in the game. So we're fixing that while understanding that we do actually need to finish the decluttering project, which is going to, for those who aren't aware, basically you get a lot of drops in Path of Exile, and we're essentially finding a way of turning item quantity into rolling multiple items and dropping the best ones instead. So in a situation where you clear a map and have 400 rares on the ground or whatever, that's going to be a much lower number of rares, but it's equivalent to seeing more than 400. So instead of having to ID 7 swords and see if any are good, you'll be IDing 1 or 2 swords, which are equivalent or better than the 7 that you previously would have seen. And so this is something we're working towards, because there's a lot of items in Path of Exile, and this, of course, affects the whole clicking thing, where players are saying they have to pick up a lot of stuff. Obviously, if there is a more reasonable number of items falling, then there's far less clicking involved there. It probably has an effect on performance with rendering all the items on the ground and so on. I mean, a small effect, but every item is technically a draw call for the item and for its shadow. So reducing the vast sea of white items on the ground certainly helps. And so that's a project we're working on, but it's also a dangerous one, because right now you're used to seeing a lot of items and you ID them and they're generally bad, which is okay because you're not meant to get an upgrade every area. But if we say, okay, items are better now, and we reduce it a lot, so you get far fewer items and you ID those, and those are also still all bad, which is okay because you're not meant to get an upgrade every area, you'll say, what is the point? You've just given me far less items and they're still bad. Because it's hard to tell the difference between 2 random distributions that aren't spitting out 10s at you, if you see what I mean. And so we want to make sure we do this in a way where the game still feels very compelling to find item upgrades without making it too easy as a result, in order to bribe players to like the system. Anyway, we'll get it sorted out, but that's basically a project for later this year, hopefully.
It is an interesting psychological challenge, because like on the surface, it seems like a great idea to reduce the items, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I hope that it does work out really well, but it's an interesting concern that it might not end up feeling right.
It's one of those things where if we did release it with Path of Exile 2, this is how items work now. Look, there aren't that many of them, but look, there's a fun game where the progression is good and you're finding compelling rare upgrades and everything is balanced around it and have fun. Things would be 100% fine, right? You can pitch it wherever you want on the rare power curve and the game still works. But we have a game right now where players have expectations to get upgrades at a certain pace. And if we just said, look, the new reality is upgrades are far slower or something, that wouldn't be acceptable. So we have to make sure that the power ascension of items is similar to how it currently is. It's just done through players not having to read as many items per area.
PoE2 does seem like a good time to do that change, but is there any chance this loot squish thing is happening essentially earlier than PoE2?
I think it needs to happen earlier, and I say that because we want to actually make sure it's good by the time PoE2 is released, and this is something we can I don't want to jeopardize the launch of PoE2. I would much rather get feedback from players and try to solve problems. I sympathize with the fact that people say they have to click a lot, right? And sure, action RPGs are about picking up items and clicking, but there's a lot of items in Path of Exile, more than there should be. And so that's something that we probably need to address. And players have raised the whole, maybe it affects performance, and undoubtedly everything affects performance. That's not the primary reason for fixing it, but it certainly helps to, reduce the sea of items on the ground and just readability and approachability. How would want Path of Exile to feel approachable to new players, and if they look at a guy playing a map with the sea, the floor is entirely covered with items, and that's with the loot filter on. There are many reasons why we do need to address it earlier. It just means we have to do it in a way that's careful to not cause players to feel that we've wrecked drops in the game, even though our goal is equivalent or better item power from drops.
So just mentioned that people randomly seeing the game thing. I'm just curious why there isn't a cap on character size in regards to Headhunter. Why do we get Shin point of view Headhunter characters instead of just I don't know, 3 times the size characters? Which is still impressive. Just curious.
I don't know why there isn't a cap on it. 1 second. The team says There is a cap now in 3.14. Well, there you go. Look what you've done, Ziggy.
What?
You talk.
I did
talk.
it. I killed Shin Point of View single-handedly. It's all my fault.
Right there. They're live editing the game as you're suggesting stuff. What else would you like changed?
I did it. I'm not even sad if people are gonna be mad at me for that. I'm sure there's like some like small portion of players that's like, I love Shin Point of View.
I will make sure that that's listed in the patch notes under a section called Ziggy nerfs.
Yes. Perfect. I'll own that. Oh, great. I did want to ask about the like rare rolling system. It was used in ritual on certain items, right? Where they would have the better rolls. Is it potentially used on the rewards from
Ultimatum?
Ultimatum, that's the one.
Yes. It is, and that's because this is a case where we say to you, this is the reward you'll be getting, and if that's a random rare with normal odds, people will look at it and say, I see 1,000 random rares in a typical play session, I don't care about your item. Whereas we're going to show them some good items, and they're going to say, I'm going to risk everything, and then they're going to die, and then they'll be angry, and we'll laugh.
You'll laugh. I know you do. I know you will. Is there anywhere else you're looking to add that system? Like to, I don't know, like certain League-specific
Leute, ich glaub, wir haben
reward
genug gesehen.
pools, blighted pustules?
Ich würde mich tatsächlich mal jetzt langsam Richtung Bett begeben. Aber sah ziemlich alles cool aus. Path of Exile 2, brutal. Brutal. Bin gespannt. Ich weiß nicht, ob ich Path of Exile 1 Ultimatum spielen werde. Ich weiß es nicht, ob es mich wieder so reizt, mich durch 10 Akte zu quälen. Für einen Charakter, für 2 Charaktere, für 3 Charaktere. Ich weiß noch nicht.